All right, good morning. I'm Sarah Whiteway. Kate Huber's with us. We're from Creating Healthy Schools and Communities, and this morning we're talking about the importance of recess and alternatives to withholding recess. So overall, the big question of this presentation is, are we talking about recess as a reward to be earned only by children who are on task and who comply with academic and behavioral expectations? Or are we saying that recess is an important part of every child's school day and it offers enough benefits to physical health, social development, and their sense of autonomy that it's too important to be taken away? And as you can probably guess, my take on this is the second one, and that we need to be treating recess really as it is too important to be taken away. And sort of the goal of my presentation is to convince you of that and give you some options for how to make sure that happens. So overall today, I'm going to cover why recess is something you should care about, something you should care deeply about. I'm going to talk a little bit about the statistics and what is going on with recess withholding. I'm going to talk about what the impact is on students when recess is withheld. And then I'm going to finish up with some alternative discipline options. So to start off, the benefits of recess, and particularly I'm going to be talking about the benefits of having a quality recess. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean when I say quality recess. So the best recess provides both all cognitive, social, and physical benefits. And the National Association for the Education of Young Children recommends that unstructured play is an appropriate way of reducing stress, and that recess provides children with the opportunity to exert energy in a healthy way. So now, sort of what kind of recess do you give your students, and what kind of benefits does that provide? So let's talk first about an indoor recess with students playing on a small device or on a device or some small toys at their desk. So this is what I think of as like the classic COVID recess. You couldn't do much else, but this was what you could do. And that does provide a break, and breaks help prevent fatigue and burnout. And so it does provide some cognitive benefits. It's the same kind of thing as taking a break from doing your work by scrolling through social media for 10 minutes. You need that break sometimes. But is it the best break that you could get? Or is there a way that you could get some extra benefits by taking a different kind of recess or a different kind of break? So the next one I'm going to talk about is, what if students stay in the classroom, but they're able to choose a quiet game or activity to play with others? And what kind of benefits does this provide? So again, you still get that break that helps prevent fatigue and burnout and provide some cognitive benefits, but now you're also getting some social benefits. So first off, time to socialize. Students want that, need that, and it gives them a chance also to learn and practice those social emotional skills like sharing, turn taking, making good decisions, and negotiating. So it gives them also that SEL practice. And finally, it allows the instructor to assess some of those SEL skills, to see who is popular, to notice the students who get left out over and over again, who has trouble making friends, and like being able to make some adjustments based on that assessment. So I would say this kind of recess provides some benefits above and beyond sort of a quiet sitting at your desk on your own recess. And then what about an indoor recess in the classroom where you use Go Noodle or some other kind of physical activity video or instruction? So now you're getting the cognitive benefits of the break, getting like some of the better focus after recess because they've been able to get some of that energy out. And it provides a lot of physical benefits as well. So it increases their physical activity at other times. It's been shown that students that get physical activity during class time are more likely to choose physical activity outside of class time. It allows them to blow off steam and helps reduce stress. Afterwards, they do less fidgeting and work harder. And then it contributes overall to those like 60 minutes of physical activity that we know all students need. So it contributes to a healthy lifestyle. So here you've got a lot of physical benefits, but you're not getting some of those social benefits that you got in the last kind of recess, because students aren't interacting with each other sort of freely. So now going on to the next best kind of recess. So how about an indoor recess in a gym or some other space where they have equipment and room to run and play? So this is like the ideal, excuse me, indoor recess. It allows students to get physical activity while also allowing them the choice of who to play with and what to play. So it's not a PE class because it's not instructor driven, and they can choose to sit around and talk or read a book or run around playing tag. And that choice is really important. And it has all the social benefits of like that classroom recess, that they're interacting with each other, but also almost all the physical benefits of the physical activity type recess. It's an amazing recess. It's hard to make happen in Buffalo in the winter because there's often not enough gym space for it, which brings us to our final type of recess, super quality recess, and that's taking them outside with access to equipment, room to run around and play. So it has all the same benefits of that indoor quality recess, with some extra outdoor time can improve students' mood. I would argue it's also even more possible for students to have free choice of activities because nature provides some inspiration that like a gym setting doesn't. Students could pick dandelions, watch the clouds, have a quiet moment on their own, as well as play tag, use the swings, or talk to their friends. And this is the recess that we should be aiming for. And it should be possible at least 90% of the time. There are going to be some days in the school year that it's pouring rain, thunder and lightning, or super duper cold, and you have to substitute another type of recess. But most of the time, this should be what we're aiming for. This should be the default. And if there's something that's stopping this from being the overwhelming majority of days, figuring out what that is that's stopping it should be a goal of your school and your district wellness committee. So now we're done talking about sort of all the benefits that recess provide. And I could go into tons of details, and there's been lots of studies on all of the benefits of recess and sort of how it helps students academically. But I've got some resources at the end that you can check out if you want to know more about that. So now I want to move on to talking about withholding recess and sort of the statistics around this. And we're going to talk about like sort of just how common withholding recess is. So in a 2010 Gallup survey, 77% of principals said that some or all of their teachers used withholding recess as some sort of punishment. So that's a lot of schools that are using withholding recess to sort of make students comply with behavioral or academic expectations. And then in a survey of elementary school teachers, 100% of the teachers surveyed said that recess was beneficial. So it's not that teachers don't know that recess has benefits. They all said that it was beneficial, but 67% of teachers said they had withheld recess for one or more students in the past year. So then the question is, if teachers know that it's beneficial, why are they withholding recess? And they do it primarily due to student misbehavior or failure to complete academic classwork, with some also saying they use withholding recess when students didn't complete their homework, and some having other reasons for doing it. but mostly it's for behavioral issues or that students didn't complete their classwork. And so why is withholding recess sort of a thing that they use as a discipline technique for this? And what they said in this survey of 213 teachers in Massachusetts in 2014 and Ohio in 2017. So from the same survey of teachers, this is what teachers expressed. They expressed frustration and a sense that they have few other options for controlling misbehavior in their classroom. And in a few minutes, we're going to talk about some of those other options, what else you can do. But first, I want to get into what is the impact on students of withholding recess? So what happens when you withhold recess from students? And it's not great. So this is a quote from Rebecca London, and she has written a book called Rethinking Recess. And in it, she says, when recess is withheld, it's not only that they aren't able to enjoy the time, they're also being harmed by taking away this opportunity for important child's development. So if we all agree that recess has all these benefits, then taking it away is harming students by not letting them access all of those benefits. And I have another quote here, and this is from a journalist named Jackie Mader, who covers early child education and wrote an article called "Is Recess a Right or a Privilege?" And she states that withholding recess as a punishment can negatively affect a child's relationship with teachers, their feelings about school, and their sense of self-worth. And it's a punishment that is especially stigmatizing and visible to their peers. So students notice who is not having recess, who is being held back in class or told that they have to sit out of recess because they weren't behaving or they aren't finishing their work. They notice that, and it can feel like you're being left out to students. So then, who are the students that are having recess withheld? And given what we know about I can't say this word, about who is given other school discipline, we can make some assumptions about who's not getting recess. So there's a lot of evidence that discipline is not given out equitably, that Black and Brown students, especially boys and children in special education, are disciplined more often and more severely than other children. And I'm going to show you a couple of slides on that, but there's no reason to think that this wouldn't also apply to something like withholding recess. So this is a graph that comes from the Virginia Department of Education, looking at the rate of out-of-school suspensions of different race students, going from 2010 to 2016. But this data could be from anywhere because this is happening across the country. But overall, they found that in 2016, 20% of Black students were being suspended, 8% of Latinx students, and 5% of white students. And we've got similar data for special education students, 12% of special education students being suspended, and 5% of not special education students. So who has recess withheld? We might guess that Black and Latino boys, as well as children in special education, experience the highest rates of recess withholding. But I want to say that we don't know, we don't have that data. And the reason we don't have that data is because having recess withheld is not something that anybody tracks. It's what people call a form of shadow discipline, the same as, standing outside in the hall, or anything that isn't really a suspension or an expulsion doesn't get tracked based on who it's happening to. So our big question for today is recess a reward to be earned, or is it so important that we shouldn't take it away? And if we're requiring that students meet those requirements of being on task and complying with academic and behavioral expectations, in order to get all those cognitive, social, and physical benefits that we know recess provides, and the students who most need some of those benefits are the ones that are most likely to be held back from recess, overall, withholding recess is promoting inequity in our schools. So the kids who are able to quickly complete their academic work, get a break, and then come back to class refreshed and ready to focus. The kids who are struggling through their academic work stay in during recess and are then tired and less able to focus after recess. The students who are having trouble with social interactions and getting along with their peers have recess withheld because of those behavior issues, and they miss out on that opportunity to practice their social skills and develop those friendships. And the kids who can't sit still and concentrate, instead of running around and using up all of that sort of excess energy, are sitting and are even more amped up after recess and more likely to cause behavior problems. So it makes school worse for the kids who are already struggling. So I would argue that we really don't want to do that. All right, so given that recess is good for students, cognitively, socially, and physically, withholding recess is pretty common. It harms students and increases inequities, but educators use it because they don't have access or don't feel supported in other discipline options. We need to create structures and policies and practices to support alternatives instead of withholding recess. And I'm going to talk now a little bit about what those could be. So the research shows that exclusionary discipline practices don't work that well. Schools are moving away from those exclusionary discipline practices like the expulsion and suspension, and finding more effective ways to address behavior issues that ensure kids remain in the learning environment and they grow in like a whole child way. So a more sort of positive approach to classroom and school management. And one of the things we can do, as well as move away from expelling and suspending students, is also to move away from practices like withholding recess and using more positive and student-centered approaches. And there's a lot of different approaches that can be used, a lot of different like positive discipline approaches. And so I wanted to share this link by the national, what was it? I can't remember who put out this link, but it's a good one with lots of different discipline resources for school staff, just so that if you want to look up more, you can. But I'm going to just highlight a couple that are used very widely. And those are, the first one of those is restorative practices. So these are like proactive school-wide strategies that develop basically your SEL skills, also a sense of belonging and agency for students. So things like restorative circles, conflict resolution programs, peer-led practices to respond to incidents, but also teaching kids those social emotional skills before they run into conflicts. So restorative practices are sort of commonly talked about in a lot of the schools that we work in. And if your district or your school is using those practices, you can tap into that for some of your classroom management instead of withholding recess. Also, PBIS, especially like school-wide PBIS, the tier 1 PBIS practices, which are, similar. You're using positive discipline, you're sort of finding ways to reward students for all of their good behaviors, as opposed to punishing them for the behaviors that you don't want to see. And you can also obviously use like the tier 2 and the tier 3 approaches as well in this. But all in all, I would say that if you can find ways to encourage the good behavior as opposed to punishing the behavior you don't want to see, you will be able to get away from a lot of those sort of inequitable discipline techniques. And then a simplest way to do this, if you don't have sort of access to school-wide interventions, or you can't you can't start a PBIS program by yourself in your class. What you can do is find a way to provide recess to all students, and then for good behavior, for completing their homework, for all of the things that you want to see, you can give them extra recess as a reward. So this is really just reframing the way you offer recess, that first assume about 20 minutes is given every day, and use an extra 10 minutes to reward the behaviors you want to see. So instead of you need to sit out of recess because you didn't complete your homework, switch to everyone gets 20 minutes of recess, but if you work hard enough on this unit, lunch, and you get it all done by lunchtime on Friday, we can have a longer recess on Friday afternoon. So something like that, just a pretty simple reframe in how you present recess to students can make a difference in sort of how they feel about it, and also still get you the behaviors that you'd like, while also getting them the benefits of having daily recess. And then if like all of that seems impossible, you don't have the administrative support for positive discipline across the school, and maybe you can't even get to the point of saying we can always have 20 minutes of recess a day, I would say you can take some small steps to getting to that end goal of not withholding recess at all. So maybe you withhold 5 minutes of recess for students who were not behaving well during classes that day, or who didn't do their homework, or who aren't finished. Just 5 minutes instead of them sitting out the entire recess. They still get 15 minutes of it, but they have to sit out the first 5 minutes, something like that. And then one of the other things you can do is you can restrict what they do during recess. So I would say definitely don't make it something like, all right, you didn't do your homework, so you need to walk laps during recess, because we don't want to give physical activity to students sort of as a punishment, because that makes physical activity seem like a negative thing. But you could say, you know, you weren't keeping your hands to yourself today, so I'm going to ask you not to use the swings. You can do whatever else you want during recess, but no swings today. For a student who maybe loves the swings, you've still given them sort of some discipline around what behaviors you won't accept, but you're also still allowing them to get those benefits of recess. So, you know, if the bigger changes aren't possible for whatever reason, for you or for a colleague that you work with, maybe making some of those smaller changes to start with, and hopefully eventually getting to everybody getting lots of recess all the time. I almost forgot to say, I also wanted to say that restricting the choice of activity during recess is a great option for if you are running into discipline problems during recess. So if you have students that are not getting along with each other, you can tell them that they have to do separate activities during recess. Or if you have students that aren't playing well on the playground, you can say that, you know, they don't get to use the playground that day. They have to choose some other activity. And that works really well when you have recess set up sort of as like multiple activity choices. They can go on the playground, they can do jump ropes, they can do hopscotch and, you know, something else. Then it's easy to say, okay, no, you two, you're just having a hard time today being together. You got to choose different activities. So I just wanted to point out that there's also ways of making sure that even when students are having a hard time with their behavior during recess, that they still get access to recess, but maybe not to the entirety of the activity choices during recess. All right. And I know I'm getting pretty repetitive with this quote, but sometimes I think it's important that you know that the experts agree on sort of all of what I'm saying about recess. So this is a quote from the American Academy of Pediatrics in their publication, The Crucial Role of Recess in Schools. And they say that recess offers cognitive, social, emotional, and physical benefits that may not be fully appreciated when a decision is made to diminish it. Recess is necessary for the health and development of children and should never be withheld for punishment or for academic reasons. So that's sort of summing up. And now, what should you do? You are, I'm assuming if you're here, on your school's wellness committee. So please advocate for a required daily recess that can't be withheld. That's something that can just be right in your wellness policy. And in order to make sure that it is not only in your policy, but also implemented, might take a little bit of time and some professional development around recess, but that's doable. And working to get that into your policy is gonna make a difference for your school and your students. And then push for some of those school-wide positive approaches to discipline. If you don't already have them in your district, ask for them. And that will also involve some professional development on how you implement those, as well as support from administrators and leadership in making sure that positive discipline happens. And then this is just sort of my pipe dream. We need data on recess. So in gathering all of this information for this presentation, it's clear that we don't actually know how many students get recess on a daily basis. We know how many districts say that recess is mandated. We know what states say that recess is mandated, but are all those students getting it, or are some having recess withheld? And then we don't have any idea what the quality of that recess is. So I would love it if people would start doing some sort of tracking system of who goes out for recess, how long they're out for, what kind of recess. You know, are you calling it recess if they get a 10-minute break in their classroom to sit quietly at their desk? Or are you only calling it recess when they go outside? Or are you calling it recess, you know, when they do indoor but have a chance to run around? So like, what is the quality of that recess? And who has recess withheld? And there just isn't data on that. So, you know, pipe dream, someone come up with a way of getting some of that data. And I think that is all. I've got some resources here for you all, and I will share out these slides and including these resources. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't have a question, but a while back, there's an agency called playworks.org, and they do workshops for schools. And like you take a whole day of professional development, and they teach you how to do active, and they can be indoor games where you don't need supplies. Just a really simple one was like land, sea, air, where they stand around a perimeter, a rug, and they're in the sea, they step on the rug, they're on the land, they put their hands up, and then there's different activities that they do, and they help each other, but it's movement, it's social, just different things like that. So that might be, and you can access their resources, playworks.org, without having to pay anything. And we use them all the time in our leaders and training program in the summer, and the kids love them. So